Hi, friends. So today I wanted to talk about the issue with the nonverbal high context culture of Japan. I originally wanted to kind of enter this talk regarding the hierarchy and the issues regarding it, but then I realized it's not just has to do with hierarchy, but just in general, any sort of high context culture where there's a community that almost depends on that cultural understanding to communicate, both verbal and nonverbal communication and signals. Because when you have a community that has so much uh, background understanding and context in regards to how to communicate in any form with each other, uh, based off of similar experiences, I think that people begin to not only expect these verbal or nonverbal communication, but also read into the lack of the verbal and nonverbal communication. So the absence of it starts to hold a lot of meaning. And I'm sure anyone could kind of relate or understand. For example, it could be that you have a friend that you always say hi to, and maybe you have a little routine that you do when you meet them. You always give them a hug or you always give them a high five. But then one day you meet them and they don't say hi and they don't give you the high five or the hug that they've always given you. All of a sudden, this routine that and this context, this past experience that both of you had, the lack of it makes you start thinking of what that means, because that the lack of that operation, I guess, has meaning now too. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to explain in this way, where especially Japanese culture, I feel that there is a tendency for there to be so much more nonverbal communication, or even verbal communication that has non-direct nuances, which, unless you understand it and have context, you wouldn't understand the true meaning of it. And that's why they say Japan is a very high context culture, because there are so many things that only people with that context could understand. And I think in high context cultures, people just tend to have this expectation, also a bias on how they interpret things, because there's this bias in which they assume others understand. Because if anything, especially those who aren't exposed to non-Japanese culture as much, they don't understand the concept of not understanding high context. So for many who may not have experience with non-Japanese culture, they may not realize that people can't understand something unless you tell them directly. And so it blows their mind when they're communicating and the other person doesn't react to your contextual communication, or they get frustrated when they don't get uh, the return communication that they expect when they signal to them, because the absence of it, and then that becomes kind of insulting if they don't know that the other person doesn't know it. And so I think it makes it very difficult, especially, let's say, if you're in a business culture where there's a lot of expectancy in regards to this high context culture and hierarchy. Uh, it's so easy to kind of mess up or miscommunicate both verbally and non-verbally, because firstly we're humans and we of course make mistakes or don't notice everything, but also when you're doing business operations and stuff, sometimes that the priority difference, this expected kind of high context communication versus the operation, I feel like this expectation could get in the way of what's, I don't want to say, I mean, maybe saying more important is a very Western idea, but what's some would consider more important as a business objective, but and also especially with the world becoming a lot more globalized, it just becomes more difficult, I think, for cultures to be very high context or have expectations of reciprocation with the high context culture. Um, I feel like I'm using really hard words and I hope I'm using them right, but anyways. Uh, but on the other hand, I try to think of the other way of thinking about it. So then what would it be like if you don't have this high context culture and you just say everything, verbal communication, nonverbal, you just make sure that you list everything up. And non-business world, just in general life, I don't think that's necessary per se, because like as humans, I think we actually do kind of crave contextual communication. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it. Sorry if it's wrong, but what I'm trying to say is that I think people want a way to communicate in a special way that represents a special relationship or a community. You could see this on many different levels. I mean, it could just be like a head bob, like a little chin up, and you signal to that to someone, and if they give you it back to you, you kind of both have this understanding of what it means, how to use it, and the timing to use it. And it kind of creates that relationship right there. Or it could be the way you talk to your partner, and it's a secret code kind of that only you and your partner knows, that little meaning because of the contextual experience that only you and your partner know. I mean, it could even be like a generational thing, like there's always new words being invented by the younger generations and only they know how to kind of use it, and they get frustrated when other people who don't understand it use it in the wrong way. It's just, I think, it's human nature to kind of want some sort of contextual communication, but so in that sense I don't think I don't think that it's something that needs to get rid of or anything, but I guess maybe in a business setting, there could be maybe less of it because there is an urgency to kind of be sustainable as a company to survive, which requires more fluent communication to deal with operations or whatever. And maybe because the world is kind of, well, that's another topic of debate, but for now it's globalizing a lot more, so maybe we do need to kind of rethink about the expectations in regards to communication, especially those who communicate with very high context. Anyways, that's kind of what I was thinking about today, and yeah, uh, I'll have to figure out an interesting way to maneuver a culture, a high contextual culture, high context culture. Anyways, thanks for listening as always, and I'll catch you guys up again later. Bye.